Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate the second anniversary of Cyber Civil Defense, an all-of-society approach started by Craig Newmark Philanthropies, meant to give Americans and people everywhere the tools and services they need to be safe in a connected world. My name is Katie Brooks, and I'm Director of Global Cyber Policy here at Aspen Digital. We, alongside several dozen cybersecurity nonprofit organizations, are working to create a safer digital future under the banner of Cyber Civil Defense. The vision for this initiative and the coalition that supports it is driven by Craig Newmark, founder of Craigslist and Craig Newmark Philanthropies. Craig's idea for Cyber Civil Defense is simple. It's that everyone has a role to play in securing our nation from cyber attacks, whether that's securing your own home router, teaching your family and others about cybersecurity best practices, testing out new low and no-cost cybersecurity tools, holding companies to a secure by design standard, or pursuing cybersecurity as a career. There are many ways to get involved in cyber civil defense. Since its launch, cyber civil defense has become more than just an idea. It's actually a whole community, and it's a coalition. But one thing that I want to highlight is that it's a huge and a very real commitment, not just by the organizations that are a part of it, but by Craig himself. To date, Craig has committed $100 million to these causes and has been a vocal supporter, encouraging others to do the same who have the ability. Because of Craig's support, we've seen everything from more cybersecurity curriculum development for K-12 students, to important research on cybersecurity workforce development, to better teacher and school district support for cybersecurity programming, to real-time cyber assistance, and much, much more. We're thrilled that Craig can join us to provide remarks at the end of our program today to share a bit more about this effort in his own words. A bit about today's program. Since we only have an hour and the cyber civil defense effort covers many different components, we're going to focus today on cyber tools and services. So these are the low and no cost offerings to people and to organizations that need it the most, particularly those that otherwise would not have access to cybersecurity assistance, monitoring, tools, or those that might not have the expertise in-house to even know where to start. During our hour together, we'll hear a keynote from Stacey Higginbottom about the state of consumer attitudes about these cybersecurity tools, services, and best practices. And then we'll turn to a panel of leaders who do quite a bit of work in the tools and services part of cyber civil defense. They'll share information about what makes their unique approaches work and how they fill an important gap or a need for the communities that they serve. Finally, we'll close with remarks from Craig himself, as I mentioned, where he'll reflect on this effort and what the future holds. Quickly, though, a bit of housekeeping. Please feel free to use the audience Q&A feature to submit questions for any of our speakers throughout the program today. We'll proctor those out at the end of the panel, time allowing, and then again at the end of the program. Of course, if you'd like to join the conversation on social media, we welcome you to tag us at Aspen Digital or to use the hashtag CyberCivilDefense. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Over the past 2 years, as a part of Cyber Civil Defense, Consumer Reports, the Global Cyber Alliance, and Aspen Digital have co-produced an annual report called the Cyber Readiness Review. This report tracks Americans' attitudes about cybersecurity, and the data used and analyzed in these reports is from representative surveys of the U.S. population conducted by Consumer Reports yearly. Joining us to cover some of these findings and more is Stacey Higginbottom. Stacey has been writing about technology for over 20 years in major publications such as Fortune, PCMag, and more. In 2015, Stacey founded the Internet of Things podcast, and she regularly writes about the latest IoT news and the latest in consumer IoT devices. She most recently is working very closely with Consumer Reports, and today she'll be sharing a bit more about the trends and observations she sees in this space. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. As she told you, I am Stacey Higginbotham. I'm a policy fellow from Consumer Reports and a former technology reporter. So for my entire career, I have spent time parsing the difference between the tools and services that technologists are building and how consumers view those tools and services. And I can tell you today that while we have a desperate need to focus on improving the overall quality of consumer cybersecurity, the parties involved are talking about two very different things. And so when I think about this, I think about that silly book from the 90s. And it's cybersecurity experts are from Mars and consumers are from Venus. And for our cyber civil defense, it's actually really important that we get this right. The attack surface has never been greater. US homes and broadband, US homes with broadband had 17 connected devices as of September 2023, according to Parks Associates. That includes your tablets, your printers, computers, your car, your phones, your Alexa devices, and connected lighting. And as more and more consumer data is collected and stored by businesses, it is increasingly targeted by attackers. This month, the 2024 Verizon Data Breach Report told us that it now, sorry, that we now have triple the vulnerabilities that are being exploited from the prior year. And it takes about 55 days to remediate 50% of those critical vulnerabilities. So what we have right now is more devices, more data in the cloud, more attacks, and it takes longer to fix them. So this is a big deal, and we need to be talking and working at the same level. So when I say cybersecurity experts are from Mars, what I'm thinking is they are focused on preventing attacks. Their concern is locking down infrastructure so hackers can't shut down municipal water plants or insert ransomware into a hospital chain that grounds those operations to a halt. And when it comes to consumer devices, they worry about things like insecure smart home products or ransomware getting on PCs that can become part of a botnet that could be used to take down critical infrastructure. So cybersecurity experts, they want to prevent access. But what we've learned through our research at Consumer Reports is consumers don't think about cybersecurity that way. They think about it simply as security, as feeling safe. And they think mostly about their data, which is stored on millions of computers in the cloud or on smart home devices. And they want to know that no one can use their smart home devices to spy on them or infiltrate their home network. Consumers want to protect their data. And sure, they care about the big picture that the cybersecurity experts are trying to prevent. But to get consumers to take action, we have to make it easy for them. And we have to give them a reason to want to do it. And that reason is increasingly related to protecting their data and their privacy. And because from a consumer's perspective, cybersecurity is hard, you often have to force them to do it. So to get consumers to beef up security, technologists and government action needs to focus on making it as easy as possible and giving consumers a win where they want it around their data protection and privacy. So a really great example of success can be seen in the consumer adoption of passwords. And this is data from our cyber readiness report that we produced with all of these organizations back in October. But basically, consumers are adopting passwords at an excellent rate. And they're doing this for a couple of different reasons, mostly because manufacturers have started forcing consumers to change their passwords. We all remember, because it comes up in every one of these discussions back in 2016 with the Mirai botnet, when that shone a light on poor cybersecurity practices on equipment that was ubiquitous in homes and small businesses. These devices had default passwords and thus were easy to access. And then those devices were used in a botnet attack that took down websites and critical infrastructure. So to protect against that, we saw a big push for password adoption and forcing password changes. And that has ultimately been really successful. According to our data from that cyber readiness report, we've seen that 87% of consumers have changed the default password on their router, probably because it's forced. 83% of consumers password protect access to their phone using some kind of PIN or biometric. And that's also because it has become increasingly easy for them to do that. a little more than 3/4 of consumers, so that's 76% of us, are using multi-factor authentication. We may not want to, but a lot of device companies and services are forcing it. And 67% of us are using different passwords across each of our services. This is an incredible win. And it has come because consumers, or because manufacturers and governments have realized that to talk to consumers, they needed to make it easy and, I would say, unavoidable. So forcing the change, making it easy by helping push things like password services. And you'll see with multi-factor authentication data that consumers increasingly choose the easiest way to do it. And so we see with multi-factor authentication, 82% of consumers choose SMS texting or some sort of text-based adoption. And they do that because they've got their phone right there where they're trying to log in. 50% will use a multi-factor authentication app, which kudos to everybody else. And then usage drops off incredibly after that. 26% will do a verifying phone call, and only 6% will use a physical security key. So the key that we've learned from both password adoption and the way that consumers choose their multi-factor authentication is that forcing it, understanding that consumers want to protect their data, and drawing a clear line between that data protection and a good password has helped. And as a win for the cybersecurity experts, we're actually preventing access to systems that will help prevent botnets. So I think we can learn a lot of this as we talk about another upcoming program from the government that's aimed at boosting overall consumer cybersecurity, and that is the US Cyber Trust Mark program. This is a program that was launched last year by the FCC. And the idea is that smart home devices will get a label that says that this device has gone through some sort of certification program to make it secure. And it will be easy for consumers because consumers just have to look for the label. Now, where I think we could take some of the lessons we learned from password adoption is we need to make sure that this program is not just talking to the cybersecurity experts and preventing access and doing those cybersecurity elements, but it is also giving consumers a win. And by that, I mean helping them protect their data and privacy. So we did some research around what consumers want here. And with the Cyber Trust Mark program today, as it stands, it requires to obtain the mark, companies have to do about 5 cybersecurity things. And they have to disclose how they handle passwords. They have to tell consumers how to securely configure the device. They have to disclose the update strategy and give consumers a support timeframe that those updates will be given to them. So how long that their device will actually stay secure in their home. And then they need to let consumers know if it has a list of hardware or software used in the device, like an SBOM or an HBOM. Now, most consumers probably won't go that in depth, but what I think would add a lot of value to this program, those prior elements help prevent access and keep a device secure, which is a total win from the cybersecurity expert's perspective. From the consumer perspective, I think it's a little harder sell unless we start talking about protecting their data, which is something they care deeply about. We did research with consumers about this program, and 67% of consumers that we interviewed about cyber labels named understanding who has access to their data as the top priority. That was followed by the length of time that the device will get security support. So, yay. So I think what we can take away from this is that as we're building out this program and any other cybersecurity program designed to appeal to consumers and get them to adopt things, that we need to focus on giving them ease of implementation and something that helps them draw a clear line between implementing the program and protecting their data, which is actually what consumers really want. Thank you. Back to you, Katie.
Excellent. Thanks, Stacy. And I love the case that you made about making security easy for consumers and actually making it a default wherever possible. It's really the perfect segue into our panel, and I'm sure our panelists will be excited to touch on this theme as well. I'll now hand it over to Nicole Tisdale, Senior Advisor to Aspen Digital Cybersecurity Program, to introduce and to moderate the panel. Nicole, over to you.
Thanks so much, Katie. So I'm Nicole Tisdale. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Cyber Programs at Aspen Digital. And just as a single pigeon can't carry the load alone, our collective efforts for the Cyber Civil Defense Network ensure that we all fly safely together. With that in mind, we're going to hear from our distinguished panelists who are leading these collaborative efforts to work to enhance our cybersecurity. So first up, we have Ann Cleveland, who truly has figured out how to kill two birds with one stone by wearing two hats at the Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity and the Consortium of Cyber Civil Clinics. And kick us off and tell us a little bit about the significant impact that you have been able to deploy with the Consortium of the Cyber Civil Clinics.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks so much, Aspen Digital, for hosting. I'm loving the bird puns already. My name's Ann Cleveland. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at UC Berkeley, and also the co-chair and co-founder of the Consortium of Cybersecurity Clinics. So Nicole, thanks for the question. And I'll go back to Stacy's comments talking about, it takes 55 days, I think you said, on average, to remediate a vulnerability. And that's really for organizations that have a cybersecurity department or IT support or some professionals in that organization who are thinking about cybersecurity all the time. But imagine all of the millions of small businesses, small nonprofits in our communities, maybe your local food bank, small critical infrastructure providers, including maybe your small town's local government, that don't have an IT person or a cybersecurity person. So definitely not the ability to remediate those vulnerabilities, and often haven't even taken the first step on their cybersecurity maturity journey because it's intimidating. So that is where university-based cybersecurity clinics come in. People are really familiar with this model from schools of law and schools of medicine. So, think of a clinic in a law school that provides pro bono legal defense to clients who can't afford representation. A cybersecurity clinic is that model, just applied straight to cybersecurity. So our students, and there are soon going to be over 30 cybersecurity clinics nationwide. So students in several dozen states are taking a class and providing cybersecurity services and assistance to organizations in their communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to these services. It's a win-win. I forget what you said about flying with two flocks or something like that. But yes, it's a win-win because these critical organizations in our communities get cybersecurity services. And then our students get that hands-on learning, which helps prepare them better for the workforce, puts a real-world experience on their resumes, and teaches them about cybersecurity for defending critical public infrastructure and community organizations. So we think this is a really exciting model. And as I said, we now have a nationwide consortium of cybersecurity clinics that is even expanding internationally, thanks in large part to Craig's support. And our goal is to have at least one university, college, or community college-based cybersecurity clinic in every state in the country and the District of Columbia by 2030.
Great. Well, thank you. And I will say, as someone who in law school served in a legal clinic, that was some of the most rewarding community work that I've done. And so not only are you providing access and tools to the nonprofits that are using your services today, you are making lifelong learners and community servants from the students. So we really like the work that you all are doing at the consortium of clinics. And so we're talking about remediating vulnerability. So I feel like that is the perfect segue to turn it over to Todd, who is the Alliance Director at the Shadow Server Foundation. So Todd, talk to us a little bit about the shadowiness that is the Shadow Server Foundation. What are the primary tools and services that the Shadow Server Foundation currently provides, and how are we adapting these tools to current cyber threats?
Right. So, thanks, Nicole. It's great to be here, and thanks to Aspen for hosting. It's a great event. So, yes, as Nicole said, my name's Todd Eberly. I'm the Alliance Director at the Shadow Server Foundation, and we are a nonprofit organization with a very simple mission, and that is to make the internet safer and more secure for everyone. As we all know, security can be very costly, so we aim to try to help those regardless of ability to pay for network security and for internet security. So we are the world's largest provider of free quality cyber threat intelligence. So we use this and give this intelligence away for free to help network owners secure and protect their network. So how we do that, we operate and staff a data center in California, and we collect cyber threat data at scale. So think massive quantities, massive amounts of data. And we collect this data through a variety of technical means, from malware collection and analysis to scanning the internet 150 times a day and other ways as well. And then we share out this information, this data, for free every day with network owners who sign up, who subscribe to receive our daily reports. And these reports will tell network owners what we see from an external vantage point about their networks. And so therefore, we're providing them with what their attack surface looks like to a cyber criminal. And so we can point out to network owners where we see exposed devices, unnecessarily exposed to the internet, or misconfigured devices, vulnerabilities, vulnerable devices, compromised parts of the networks that need patched or cleaned up. And so we serve about 8,000 network owners around the world. And this is small networks with single IP addresses or a single domain to large networks run by internet service providers and governments. We service every type of organization from local, state, and federal governments, K through 12 school districts up to universities, nonprofit organizations, critical infrastructure, hospitals. We also provide that data every day to national certs in 175 countries. So national certs designated to be responsible for the networks of that particular country. So in the United States, for example, every day we provide our data to CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which involves hundreds of millions of events that we're seeing every day. We also provide free assistance to law enforcement, and this is a benefit to the public because it means law enforcement agencies don't have to spend taxpayer money on technical assistance that they need for their investigations. And so earlier, just actually a few minutes ago, it was announced that by the Department of Justice that Shadow Server was part of an investigation to take down one of the world's largest botnets in support of the FBI, DOJ, and other partners. And so how we're adapting to these new threats, basically adapting to the new cyber threats, is really at the heart of what we do, because when new threats and new software vulnerabilities are identified, within about a day or so, we can react very quickly. We can create scan signatures to look for these instances of new threats and new vulnerabilities, and it allows us to help track these emerging threats, make the public better aware of it, and make subscribers aware of whether their networks are at risk for that particular vulnerability.
Great. Well, thank you so much for explaining that, Ty. I will say to understand exactly how much threat information you all provide in the scans that you are doing. Congratulations on your work, but also congratulations on the announcement from DOJ. I will say it's a perfect transition. So we talked about how we're getting students involved on the tools and services. We are now talking about what you all are doing, how you're partnering, how Shadow Server is partnering with law enforcement, but also communities, critical infrastructures, owners and operators, big to small. And so I want to turn it over to Francesca, who is the Chief Strategy and Partnerships Officer at Cyber Peace Institute, to talk to us a little bit about what is the role that Cyber Peace has in tools and services as part of the collective, especially as you all work on initiatives to enhance the digital safety and protect vulnerable communities. Francesca?
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thanks, Aspen, for this great opportunity. As mentioned, I'm Francesca Bosco, Chief Strategy Officer at the Cyber Peace Institute. So I think that no-profits and small organizations have been mentioned before, for example, by Anne, and it's key because they are what we call under-resourced organizations, but they are also critical actors in our society. Specifically, nonprofits play a central role in providing relief, essential services. So think about, for example, healthcare, food, water, and also protecting the human rights of over 1 billion vulnerable individuals across the globe. However, I mean, there's a particular vulnerability because as nonprofits collect and retain beneficiary data, for example, they receive donor funds through digital channels, or for example, they manage key operations via internet-connected systems, their vulnerability to cyber attacks has increased in the past years. And this is due to the fact that nonprofits come across as a sort of like cyber poor, but target reach to cyber criminals. And while cybersecurity, we heard also from the previous speakers, is a problem for all sectors of our societies, for all industries, it has become a particular challenge for nonprofits. So we developed the Cyber Peace Builders Program, which is an international network of corporate cybersecurity volunteers who help nonprofits defending themselves in cyberspace. It provides, I would say, both a sustainable but also a scalable solution to bring cyber expertise to nonprofit amidst the global talent shortage that was already addressed. And I mean, just to give some quick pointers, we're currently supporting 283 nonprofits with more than 800 volunteers from companies around the world. I think that there are also two other tools and services that I would like to mention. So thanks to this program, we also started seeing the increasing frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks. And nonprofits often being, I would say, kind of like virtually blind to what goes on in their network, as many other organizations. So within the Builders framework, we launched two specific services very recently to help them better protect themselves. For example, we partner with Cloudflare to block phishing attempts. And as at the Institute, basically, we get a view on the ongoing campaigns. We are also able to alert the community into time. And for example, another example of like a collaboration with cybersecurity feeds providers, like, for example, indicators of compromise. I'm thinking, for example, with Microsoft, with BitSight, and similar entities. We gather all the data that they have about nonprofits we support in one place. So we are able to alert the nonprofits whenever they have, for example, their credential leaked or a vulnerability on a web page and so on and so forth. The difference, just with let's say with the alerting, is that other than being free for the nonprofit, we are also able to use the volunteers mentioned in the Cyber Peace Builders program to help the nonprofit in order to address the situation. So not just to know about it, and often they feel helpless. So we actually provide the human resources to do it. And lastly, we are also leveraging AI for a variety of purposes, but specifically to improve both the matchmaking processes and drive up basically the volunteer engagement, ultimately increasing cybersecurity for nonprofits, but also, for example, to train nonprofits on, for example, I mean, recently we helped with the help of AI. We are training nonprofits on how to negotiate ransoms. So just to give some quick ideas on how basically to make a difference when it comes to supporting the nonprofits work.
Thank you. That's really good in terms of explaining exactly what it is that you all do. I'm very thankful that we have you all as part of the collective, especially when we talk about organizations that are to the quote of being cyber poor, but also target rich. I think there has to be an acknowledgement and a focus that based off some of the mission work, especially as it relates to human rights and protecting the rights globally, there are some organizations that are going to be targeted because of their missions. And so we're very appreciative that you all are doing that work. Okay, I'm going to transition us to Phil because this is the perfect time to talk to Phil, who's the president and CEO of the Global Cyber Alliance, because we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of services. And I want you, Phil, to discuss some of the latest advancements for tools and services that are provided by the Global Cyber Alliance and how you're using these tools and collecting these tools so that we can make sure that the communities that need them most have access to them.
Sure, Nicole. Thanks very much. And it's good to see you again and the whole team, because we, as a part of Craig's network, we partner with, I think, everybody who's on this call. I guess I'd like to start with what Stacy said about, the men are from Mars, women are from Venus experience, which I think is a really good analogy. I'll just pick a different, probably 90s related book analogy. For those of you who are parents, you might remember No David, right? And so No David is a book that involves, it's for kids, the parents always telling no, David, don't do this. And we often in cybersecurity, to go back to again to what Stacey was talking about, are in that position. No, David, don't reuse your password. No, David, don't connect that unupdated computer to the network. And in point of fact, that's just not usable for the audiences we've got. I've heard, Nicole, you talk about this a lot. We've got to meet people where they are. Right, we've got to give them advice that they can actually use. And so that's the impetus behind the things that the Global Cyber Alliance tries to do. Cyber civil defense is all about really ensuring we have a whole of society effort. And our goal is to make sure that all of those pieces have tools and services to protect themselves. And so the primary effort I would call out in that area is our cybersecurity toolkit. So we have a set of 5 cybersecurity toolkits for small businesses, individuals, elections officials, missions-based organizations, and journalists that are really designed to help people using language and capabilities that meet them where they are to protect their own basic cybersecurity. So instead of saying you need to use the second factor, you actually give them not just the description about what they need to do, but a tool or a service or information that will enable them to do it. So it's more like a cookbook with a kitchen than it is a general set of guidelines. And we've worked really hard on that. We're up to we're getting near 2 million uses of those toolkits. And in terms of around the world, the cybersecurity toolkit for small business is now available in 6 languages: English, French, Spanish, German, Bahasan, which is the national language of Indonesia, and now Portuguese as well. In terms of making tools available to everyone and building the community that will make those tools available, we, a couple of years ago, launched the first cybersecurity tools wiki, which is at act.globalcyberalliance.org, which now contains 2,500 tools that are designed to help people do the specific things they need to do, and are specifically designed to reach people in vulnerable communities. So what are the tools that are needed by nonprofits? What are the tools that are needed by parents and families? And deliver them in a language that's usable to them. The other thing I'd say about that actionable cybersecurity tools wiki is it's all done on an open content license. So anybody is free to take the stuff that we've done and assembled and use it in putting together their own services, because this absolutely is a broad community effort that requires everybody to be involved. Happy to talk about other stuff we do, but that's a core piece is actually reaching people where they are and giving them exactly what they need to get the job done.
Thanks, Phil. I love that. I love the work that you all are doing to make sure this information is not only free, but accessible. Especially we know that a lot of the cyber terms don't translate very easily. And the concepts are also new to people. So huge shout out to you and your team for always making sure that the language is accessible, the jargon is accessible, but also speaking to the communities based on the jargon and the language that they know. So we really appreciate that. I like it, a cookbook with a kitchen. I think I might actually use that. And so okay, I'm cognizant of time and we're getting a lot of audience questions, but I did want to kind of circle back with panelists because we're talking a lot about what you all do in your organizations as individuals, but I want us to talk about how we do this work together as a collective. And so, Anne, I'll go back to you first, and let's talk about what the Cyber Civil Defense Network does in terms of helping with the consortium of cyber clinics. Can you share an example of how this collaboration has advanced your mission and improved the community?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And Craig always says brevity is the soul of wit, so I will be quick. In short, we rely on every single organization represented in this panel, including you folks at Aspen Digital, Nicole, to complement and amplify our work every day. So just one example with the Cyber Peace Builders, our students go on to work in their professional volunteer program. And together we're trying to patch together a network of cyber volunteers that will meet everybody, where they need it and how they need it. Global Cyber Alliance is a key ally in the consortium, helping expand clinics internationally and providing tools to the kinds of clients we serve. But as Katie said at the beginning, it's a community. And the coalition that Craig Newmark Philanthropies has built has a few dozen organizations, but there's really a growing movement of cyber civil defenders from all walks of life: government, academia, industry, civil society. And I'll give a quick plug. There's a link in the chat. If you're interested in getting more involved in cyber civil defense, there's a Cyber Civil Defense Summit that we are hosting in Washington, D.C. on June 14th, and we would love to have you join us.
Thanks, Anne. And you're right. Craig loves when we're very brief and succinct, so I appreciate that. I will say, I think what you're highlighting is the collective of the people who are a part of our panel today and a part of our webinar, but also this is a group of more than 40 organizations. So thank you also for reminding folks that our flock is very big and very diverse. So I want to turn to you, Todd. I don't know if you're going to be able to talk to us about anything that you're currently working on with partners in our network, but I'll ask you to look backwards as you look forward. Can you share a specific instance where a collaboration with another organization within the network has helped to successfully mitigate cyber threats or a specific cyber threat?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to know that this Cyber Civil Defense Initiative has really created this network where like-minded nonprofit and volunteer organizations can come together, all with a common mission to improve internet security for the public good. And to be able to collaborate to address issues in this space. And that's important because our respective organizations are really not nearly as effective when we're working alone and we're working in our own silos. So and the reason for that is each of our organizations have its own specialties, its own skills, and tools and services that we bring to the table. And it's only through this collaborative effort, really brought together, I think, by the Cyber Civil Defense Initiative, that this network has been created to allow us to come together in a collaborative way and really work most effectively to achieve success in this space. So I think there are lots of examples, but just a couple I'll mention is I think here with the Center for, so one of the issues that we have is we have great information and great data to share at Shadow Server, but we don't have enough bandwidth in terms of the people on the ground to work directly with those who might use our data. So that's where the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity comes in with its clinics. The Cyber Peace Institute comes in to play with the Cyber Peace Builders. So boots on the ground personnel who are able to work directly with different organizations, such as the nonprofit organizations that Francesca mentioned, who can work directly with those individuals and use Shadow Server data and the tools from the Global Cyber Alliance and other tools and services from other organizations. And I think it really shows that, we're each filling a gap here. And so we all really need to rely on each other to be most effective. And so I can point to that very example where we're partnering with the Cyber Peace Institute to where their Cyber Peace Builders are using our Shadow Server data to help nonprofit organizations sort of assess their network security issues and prioritize what needs fixed or patched on their network. So I think that's a good example. We also work with Global Cyber Alliance on other projects like the Common Good Cyber Initiative to help funding these organizations, Honeypot Sensor Project that we've done together. So I think the opportunities are really endless, and I think we're really at the beginning of the great possibilities that can be achieved here.
Yeah, I think that's so great, Ty. I love that you all are providing and collecting the threat information and using the network to make sure that the threat information gets to the people who need to be warned, but also need to respond to it. And so as I turn it over to Francesca, I feel like this is going to be very hard for you, Francesca, because Anne has talked about how students are joining the Cyber Peace Builders volunteer network. And Todd talked about how they're sharing information with you all to also make sure that folks that are within the volunteer network have information. So I want to say you have to come up with another example, Francesca, or you can elaborate if it's a little bit easier. But I would love to know about a specific success story that the CCDN partnership has had that helps you have a significant difference in preventing and mitigating cyber threats.
Okay, so let me give you still, let's say, one example of someone that is here in the panel. It's a pity because I could have elaborated more on Shadow Server and the NCLDC because they are amazing partners. But again, let's say inspired by the brevity on one hand, but also by the complementarity. Another great example, and Phil mentioned it before, so we are collaborating with the Global Cyber Alliance, for example, to train over 300,000 micro, small, and medium enterprises and social enterprises in the ABAC region. And so we research, for example, how we complement each other is that we research a cyber threat landscape in 12 countries in the region, whilst GCA is training a set of trainers. So the collaboration is really unique because, again, we're building on, let's say, each other's strengths. So our research helped them tailoring the training manual, bringing us to more tangible impact. I know that Shadow Server was mentioned, but again, very much complementarity in the sense that thanks to basically detecting machines involved in malicious traffic, we can basically, through the builders, actively support the civil society organization. And with that, obviously, we are connecting the student volunteering initiative with our expert volunteering initiative. Let me just say one super quick thing. We've also seen the collateral effect, meaning growing the network into a movement with a sort of like virtuous spillover effect. Practically speaking, thanks to the network, we've done a lot of work with CISA, for example, in the US, supporting their work on high-risk communities and bringing our volunteering model across the country. Or, for example, together with NetHope, we launched the Global Humanitarian ISAC, and thanks to this, we've been recently starting working with the NGO Isaac as well, specifically to support the democracy in nonprofits. So all these partnerships are really made possible thanks to the Cyber Civil Defense Initiative. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. All right, Phil. So I have a question for you. Similar to Francesca, you can also elaborate a little bit on the work that she mentioned. I will say I love that you all are working together on the train the trainer models. I think that is how we scale information and how we make sure that communities who may not traditionally be a part of some of our cyber networks have the information that they need. So I'm a fan of Train the Trainer that in the partnership that you all have with Cyber Peace Institute. But Phil, I wanted to ask if there's any other programs or specific achievements that have resulted in the collaboration with other organizations outside of the Cyber Civil Defense Network. And if you want to go beyond the panelists, you can. Just make sure you give us a little bit of information if you're bringing in a new org that's a part of our network.
So thanks, Nicole. I could go on ad nauseum about the ways we all work together. It's Secretary of State Clinton was, famous for saying it takes a village, right? Cybersecurity just does take a village. And I think Craig's perhaps greatest effect is helping to build that global village, to help to bring together all of these different organizations, which were starting to work together already, but have continued to grow even more closely with the support and, to be frank, rather direct advice that he wants us to work together. It's community has always been a part of his message. And so that's been super important. I mean, I could go on with what we've done with Aspen, what we've done with Consumer Reports. And you already heard from Shadow Server and the Cyber Peace Institute and Anne at the consortium about all the different pieces that we do. I'll call out just a couple of quick ones.
Okay.
One is that, while it's most of the organizations here and about 35 other organizations, significantly inspired by what Craig was doing and what civil cyber defense was, formed an organization called Nonprofit Cyber, which is, organization is too strong. It's really just, it's a coalition of nonprofits, all of whom work in this space, that are working to more align what they do so they can collaborate more effectively. The other thing I'd mention, Todd mentioned briefly, which is Common Good Cyber. Craig's given $100 million to this effort, but that's a lot more people need to give that level of resourcing. And so a number of nonprofits have grouped together to try and drive greater resourcing for that broad community, again, including pretty much all of the organizations here. And what people may not know, and that's, if people want to know more about that effort, it's at commongoodcyber.org. But if people want to know more about that effort to drive funding models that will enable cyber civil defense to endure in the long term, what they may not know is Common Good Cyber was actually developed out of cyber civil defense, because the idea first came up at a meeting we hosted back in 2022 on cyber civil defense in Brussels to talk to European organizations about it. So, I'm happy to go into different examples. I will just say that, we are all partners, and, I view Anne and Stacy and Todd and you and Katie and Francesca, and we're part of a global enterprise, right? It's not GCA and Shadow Server. It's the organizations that are working on cyber civil defense. And Craig's made that possible.
Agree, 100%. And having a funder like Craig kind of step in and do the work and provide the resources that organizations need are a perfect segue to one of our audience questions. So the audience question is framed around our conversation where we keep talking about the work that we're all doing is part of an all of society or whole of society effect. And so the question is, what would we like to see more from industry and government to help support the Cyber Civil Defense Network? And I think keeping it along the theme of our webinar, let's try to answer that in terms of what other resources could be helpful so that we can make sure that tools and services are being provided to the communities most vulnerable. And you're close to this work on the ground. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have a response, maybe you can respond, and if anyone else.
Sure. I mean, you've probably all heard this before, but time, treasure, and talent are all greatly needed and greatly welcome. I'll keep it to that because I know we're close to time.
Thank you so much, Ed. I will say the other question that we got from the audience, again, I think we have some of our government partners and some of our industry partners who've joined us today, which we really appreciate. And so I also want to just leave that question open to maybe one more person who can be almost as brief as Anne was.
If I may, quickly, and coming with the civil society hat, co-design solutions, for example, both with government and with the private sector partners. So it's great to consult with a lot of the people that are here on the call, but let's co-design solutions together that are really meaningful and impactful for basically the most vulnerable.
Thanks, Francesca. I really appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to close us out because not only does Craig like brevity, he likes succinct answers. And so I want to thank all of our panelists for their invaluable contributions to our conversation today. I'm going to use one more bird pun and say it's clear that the Cyber Civil Defense Network is like a flock of birds. We're soaring together to new heights to protect our most vulnerable populations from cybersecurity threats. I'll turn it over to Katie.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. For now, we're really excited to welcome the person who started all of this. Craig Newmark, as mentioned, is the founder of both Craigslist and Craig Newmark Philanthropies. When I think he kicked all of this off, he had kind of focused mostly on cybersecurity education, cyber workforce, and what we just talked about, cyber tools and services. But really, it's taken on so much more than that. So Craig, over to you for some reflections and thoughts on the initiative.
Folks, I really appreciate it. I keep thinking about, well, things like World War II, where a country is under threat and people were expected to play whatever role they could to defending everyone else. You would protect your family, your homes. You would do what you can to protect people around you and the whole country. And that's what all this stuff is really about. We can make it more complicated, but since I now have a reputation about brevity I need to preserve, that's just the essence of things. We got to do what we can to help protect each other. And to that end, this system that I'm talking to you on is now telling me it needs to be updated. So I'll go ahead and do that in moments. Everyone, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks, Craig. And thank you for modeling that great cybersecurity hygiene practice of updating your systems when prompted. We do appreciate that. Thank you so much to our panelists and all of our speakers today for joining us. And also thanks to the audience who joined us. I think we had a really excellent representation from across sectors, from different stages of career, et cetera. And really appreciate those who submitted questions and comments. Now, I'm sure the big question on everyone's mind is how can I continue to be involved in cyber civil defense? Well, as Anne mentioned, there's a great opportunity coming up in just about 2 weeks in DC. That is the Cyber Civil Defense Summit on Thursday, June 13th. I think my colleague will put a link in the chat where you can learn more and you can register. Another big public event with cyber civil defense themes in it is our annual Aspen Cyber Summit. Our registration was just launched. That is coming up on September 18th at the Reach at the JFK Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. You can find out more at aspencybersummit.org. Again, please feel free to reach out to any of the organizations that were featured today. If you have questions, we'll continue our cyber civil defense programming to spotlight all of the great organizations and work across the network. And again, we really thank you for joining us here today. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.